On today's episode, WTM 85 miler and future 100 miler, Elliot Rueb.
This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast.
Welcome back to World's Toughest Podcast. Thank you for listening. You are listening to the number one rated obstacle course racing podcast in the world because of listeners like you. Thank you for rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. My name is Will Hicks. How are you doing? Brilliant of you to return. As I speak, we are 26 days away from World's Toughest Mudder 2021 in Laughlin, Nevada. Are you ready? Is your gear ready? Right now is a good time to have your gear ready, because in the process of getting it all ready and getting it in a bin or in your bag that you're going to take on the airplane, you will find you're missing something. Maybe you need some extra batteries, or maybe you can't find the hood you had 2 years ago. Or maybe in the 2 years since you ran World's Toughest, you lost a glove. Now is the time to get that stuff lined up so that you're not running around the last minute getting your stuff together. We're going to talk with Elliot Rueb in a minute. Elliot and his team ran the table at Toughest Mudder this year. They won every single event, and they're going to be running in Laughlin, all four guys in Laughlin this November. I enjoyed talking with Elliot. Get to that conversation in a second. But before we do, let's read some iTunes reviews. I only have 8 buttons on my pad here, and I keep hitting the wrong one. Let's read some iTunes reviews.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars. 5 stars.
Our first review comes from Joni via Podchaser. Joni writes, 5 stars. So much info for first timers. Thank you. Loved this one. Thank you, Joni. You know, literally every single person that runs World's Toughest Mudder was a first timer at some time. And there are common mistakes we all make, and sometimes we forget them. And so, anyway, I like to hit those first timers. I remember my first time, I thought that World's Toughest Mudder was a really long, tough mudder. And it is, but it's also a really hard, tough mudder. The obstacles are harder, the terrain is harder, the course is harder. So I had the idea, I can last 24 hours. That's no big deal. But it's hard. So don't make that mistake in underestimating the race. Next review comes from Joshua Kujawa from the United States. Joshua writes, 5 stars. Stellar. Will Hicks has a voice tailor-made for podcasts, in the same ballpark as the great Ryan Russillo. His personality and charisma shine like Sirius A. Keep bringing the quality content, my dude. Appreciate you. Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate you. I have a voice tailor-made for podcasts, Joshua says. I have a face tailor-made for podcasts, I'll tell you that. And Sirius A, for the kids at home, that is a star. So when he says my personality and charisma shine like Sirius A, he's saying they're really bright. Keep bringing the quality content. Very kind, Joshua. I appreciate the kind words. Will I see you in Laughlin? Everybody, will I see you in Laughlin? Here, write this down. Here's my cell phone. 619-485-2726. 619-485-2726. I'm getting in town on Wednesday. Most of my crew gets in town on Thursday. There are community events Thursday night, Friday night. There's the brunch on Monday. There is a bar crawl Monday night. I'll be at all those events. So if you want to meet up and say, hey, grab a picture or just chat, whatever, text me and we'll meet up at one of those events. Joshua, thank you for the review. Joni, thank you for the review. If you'd like to leave a review for the show, go to the Purple Podcast app on your iPhone or iOS device. Search for World's Toughest Podcast. Click our logo, then scroll down to click Write a Review, and I will read it on a future episode. If you do not have an Apple device, go to lovethepodcast.com/tough, and you can leave a review there. Ellie and I talk for like an hour, so I want to jump in and get right to Elliot. If you have any questions for me, shoot me an email, will@theocrreport.com. Follow the OCR Report on Instagram. Shoot me a text, 619-485-2726. It's time to talk with Elliot Rueb. Let's go to the phones. Elliot Rueb, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on again. It's been a while.
Elliot, we've talked offline, but this is the first time in a long time we've recorded our conversation. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, you too. It's been since after Dallas back in 2019.
It's I don't know if you noticed, but there's kind of a lot of stuff happened between 2019 and now. So big year.
There has been a lot that has happened since we last talked, between COVID and all of the racing changes that we've had.
So one thing, we're about 5 weeks out from World's Toughest, as you and I are talking. One big thing that happened this year is you and your team ran the table at the Toughest Mudder series. I don't think that's ever happened before. Tell me about your team and Toughest Mudder.
Yeah, so this team has been so much fun to run with. Back in 2020, before everything with COVID hit, I asked Javier to be on a team for one of the races, and then we ended up looping in Jake and Christian to do some racing with us as well. So we'd planned on maybe doing a 4-person, a 2-person, and then everybody running individual for at least one race. And then this year, overall, like, my goal has been kind of like more when it comes to obstacle course racing anyway, running as a team. So again, this year, the original plan was for Javier and I asked him to do one race, and then we ended up looping in Jake and Christian. So back, earlier in the year, we decided to do Poconos as a 4-person team. And then pre-planned was for Jake and I to run in Chicago, followed by Christian and Javier to run in Seattle. So there's been some changes around that due to, other race changes for myself and some others on the team. But this team coming together, we've built like this really good bond. We've raced really well together, and essentially, if you want to call it, swept the series, on East out in Poconos. We won in a relatively close race on the West Coast in Seattle here a couple of weeks ago. A dominating win, essentially. And then Jake and I in Chicago, him and I were both on that race. I don't think either of us have had a race that good in a Tough Mudder before, and we ended up setting the all-time record in the toughest, which was so much fun.
When you say it was a good race, everything was on, what does that feel like? How can you tell, like, man, I'm having a good race? You just feel strong, or what's a good race?
Like, I mean, both of us, like, the night before the race, we sat down, we were both excited. We had this like really good strategy going into the race. And then we had both trained specifically for this race to be, one of our key races of the year. And, I mean, a lot of runners will say, but we almost both like hit this like flow state essentially throughout the course of the race where, you're feeling good and you're running, and it's like running. It's not even a burden to run. You just feel good and you're happy the entire time. And you're able to push through pain or any, kinks you have in your running. And just like, it was just such a good race for both of us. Like, I've never seen between a couple of people running on a team, like the consistency through this race was phenomenal.
We should talk about, okay, so Javier Escobar is the guy you're talking about, Javier. Jake is Dr. Jake Ramsey, right? Ramsby?
Crazy Dr. Jake Ramsby, yes, sir.
And then Christian Brown Johnson is the fourth member of your guys' team. What are you guys doing for Worlds? Are you running as a team? Are you running a 2-4 solo?
So some of this is still up in the air. So we've got Javier and Christian are for sure both running solo. Both of them are serious contenders for the podium. And then, Jake and I are still up in the air. So, before we got on the call, I was just showing you I am currently in a walking boot. So I am low to no impact due to a stress fracture. I had this even going into Seattle, but still chose to race. So I am, as well as Jake, we are both currently registered for WTM to run solo. Ultimately, the goal is to run as a team and see if we can challenge that 120-mile record at Worlds. We would love to go over that, but as long as I'm feeling comfortable that Jake and I can get to a point where we can seriously contend. If we can get to the point where I can seriously contend, we'll go as a team. And if I'm not feeling that at that level with my injury where it's currently at, we'll end up going solo and see what both of us can do as individuals. But still pushing to where we can run as a team, but we'll see where it goes. We can talk, a week or 2 weeks out. Hopefully by then, we've had a decision and as to exactly what we're doing at Worlds.
Like you're literally in a walking boot right now as we're talking, and that's 5 weeks out. That's got to make you a little nervous. Like, am I going to be good to go?
It's very nerve wracking. Luckily, crazy Dr. Jake is a physical therapist. So after Seattle, me running with my injury and as well as a couple of other teams, members on our team focusing on a couple of other items, I think Jake has sent us almost a dozen videos on Instagram for, me to focus on, building foot strength, doing some, we'll call it some toe yoga, to make sure my foot is recovering how it's supposed to. I'm living on a Peloton right now, essentially. So if I don't have saddle soreness at a current moment, like I'm on that bike trying to make sure that I'm, keeping myself in decent shape so that I can compete at Worlds.
You're building those chafing muscles.
Yeah. I mean, prior to this, like my focus was 100% on running. Like if it wasn't for this injury, I'd probably be putting, 2 hours a day on my feet, training up in the mountains, like getting ready to go. And now it's like after an hour and a half on the bike per day, like I'm sore and struggling. So trying to build up that endurance. So, just being able to, keep that lung capacity and be able to keep a sustained heart rate for a long period of time is really important going into Worlds. So, just trying to keep that in shape so that, as long as I'm healed up and Jake and I are able to, if we're able to go as a team, I want to be, ready to go. Well, I mean, individually, I don't know if I'd be able to pull off the numbers I would like to this year, but as a team, if I'm able to get there, I think Jake and I can put up a really good performance.
You've run individually before. Talk about the difference running individually versus running as a team. For me, it's just more fun. Like, I mean, obviously there are advantages, like you'll have someone help you over the wall, but for me, it's way more enjoyable having people around you like the whole time instead of being, all by yourself at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it's good to have somebody to talk to, the entire time, especially in those dark hours of the night when there's almost nobody on course. Having a teammate there beside you, pushing you is really good. That's when you're on a 4-person team and you're going 2 at a time. So going as a 2-person team, you are still going to have those, parts of the night where you're the only person out there. I would say fortunately for me, I probably run better when I'm by myself in that situation, as opposed to running with another person. I don't know if it's a mental thing or something around expectations while I'm running next to somebody, but I almost perform better when I'm pushing myself out there on the course.
The rules for 4-man team, for any teams, is you have to run the first lap together and the last lap together, and then any lap in between that, at least half the team has to be out on course together. So on a 2-man team, a lot of time, like you just said, you're by yourself a lot of the time with your partner back in the pit. Do you think about that partner back in the pit? Like, oh man, he's probably looking at his watch. I got to get back there. Like he knows exactly what I'm doing or how long it's taking me. I got to get back quicker.
Constantly. So, I mean, going back to Chicago when Jake and I were running, It was about halfway through the race, or maybe 3/4 the way through the race, when we had like kind of solidified the win. Essentially, we had lapped the second place team, and they didn't have a chance to catch up. And it was almost a competition between Jake and myself, at least to me, maybe not Jake, as to who is going to run a faster lap. And he won every time, which was so frustrating. I would come back into the pit. We were winning. We were having an awesome race. And I would come back in so frustrated. He'd beat me by 30 seconds on a 5-mile loop. He'd beat me by 7 seconds. And all I wanted to do towards the end of that race was beat Jake on a lap. And I could never get there. I was so close. But it almost came to a competition between Jake and I to see like who could put down a faster lap on that course.
That's got to keep you, like, it helps the team though. Like, you're competing against each other, but you're getting your times down faster and faster every lap.
Yeah, I was so happy. Jeff, Jake's dad, was out there crewing for us and writing the times down. And he said, "Oh, Jake is going to slow down this next lap." So I'm like, "All right, I got this. He's going to be slowing it down, and he'll still come in like 5 seconds before me." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" But it's good to have that competition between teammates and be able to, competitively push each other while you're still on the same team trying to reach the same goal.
It's funny. 5 seconds is just like coming off an obstacle if you walk for a second instead of run. Like, 5 seconds is nothing on a 5-mile lap.
No, not at all. And like, that's why I say, like, consistency in that race for Jake and I was incredible. Like, I've never seen two people run at that like high of a level for that long of a period of time and have our lap times so close to each other. Like, while we were really, really pushing and not strategically running, our slowest lap in the race, I think, was 52 minutes.
Wow. What number World's Toughest will this be for you?
So this will be my 4th World's Toughest. Every year I've had increasing mileage, so have to make sure that happens again this year.
What was your 2019 mileage?
85 miles in 2019.
What was your first year?
65.
So you've been in the community for a while. You've started. 65 is obviously, for your first year, is amazing. That's, if you're a first timer listening, like, that's not going to happen to everyone. But what's it been like to be kind of 65 is the top end of probably the right of the bell curve, but like still in the big hump, you could call it, right? And now you're like moving down where you're like, 85 miles. I mean, that was probably top 10 last year, 2019. What place did you get in last time?
Yeah, so I was in 7th in 2019. The year prior to that was, I believe, 16th with 75 miles. And my first year was just outside the top 50 with 65 miles. And I think I have to attribute some of that to just, one, consistency and training as I got closer to 2019. And, back towards 2016, I was kind of like still somewhat new into OCR, where I was doing Spartans and Tough Mudders racing every single weekend, exhausting myself, having fun, meeting people, enjoying the community. And then as I decided to become a little bit more competitive and got into better shape and, had some success in a few races, like really decreasing the amount I'm racing, focusing on training, and then going into these races with higher expectations has really helped me improve over time.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that though. Like, especially like when I started, you're super excited about it and you want to be out there every weekend and you're meeting people and you're doing a bone frog or you're doing a savage, you're doing anything you can find because it's just so much fun. And then you're like, you know what? Hey, I'm going to get, like, I love the community, but I want to get serious about that. I don't think there's anything wrong. And some people stay in that first thing where they're just like, you know what? I'm here for the atmosphere. I'm here for the festival. And I don't think there's anything wrong with choosing what you want to do and going either way.
Yeah, I mean, the first, couple of years I got into racing was in Spartan, and I think I got up to a 6 or 7 times trifecta. I was tracing that bigger medal. I didn't quite get up to like the dinner size plate of those Spartan medals.
Those are kind of silly, right? Like, it gets to a point where you're like, come on, man, like, let's be real here.
But I mean, there's a couple of those guys walking around the Spartan Festival area, like with literally a dinner plate size medal hanging around their neck, and I'm like, I want that. I got to try.
Like a serving plate, not just like a plate, but like you could put a turkey on it.
I mean, legitimately, I think, like, so I got up to like 6, but I'm pretty sure there's people up to like 12, 13 or more trifectas. And I'm just like, wow, that is impressive. That's a lot of racing throughout a year.
And you know what? More power to those guys too. Like they found their thing and they're chasing it. I think it's great. Like whatever gets you off the couch and keeps you motivated.
Yeah, and that's where I started. But as I started looking at results a little bit more, I've always been a competitive person. So I started looking at results, and like the less I raced, the better I did. But I was, really having some specified training blocks that helped me improve and, learn new ways of training. And, like the last few years, I've been living in Reno, just outside of Tahoe. So I've had like the perfect area for training and kind of like honed in on these longer races, and it's really paid off for me.
Speaking of longer races, have you done some non-OCR races for training or for what's your regimen look like?
Yeah. So like something that I think outside of OCR that I'm starting to focus on in now is the 200 plus mile races. So Destination Trail is out there putting on, these crazy long races. So in 2020, no races were going off. I was, not expecting to be racing at all. In 2019, like not many people were traveling or anything. I still traveled to Europe 8 to 9 times in 2020 for work. So traveling a ton. And then when I was back in the US, I didn't have to focus on racing. There was nothing coming up. So I was, my other hobby outside of racing is skydiving. So I think in 2020, I put in like 300 skydives, which was, so much fun to get back into that as a hobby as well. And then out of the blue, I was like, no races were happening. And I just threw my name on the list to run the Moab 240. So I was on the wait list for like 4 months. And a month before the race, I get off the wait list into the race. So I essentially run the Moab 240 couch to 240 with my longest training run of the year being, a 50K, 5 weeks out.
How was it like? What was it like running 240 miles?
I feel like that helps me so much with I'm going to call it a shorter race for right now, saying that a 24 or 12-hour race feels really short when the Moab 240. So, no training, essentially going into that race was 4.5 hours of sleep in 4.5 days of running. I had heat stroke. I had hallucinations, no sleep. I'm just like lucky I had a pacer. My friend Joe from college came out I think he helped me with the last 70 miles of that race. I'm just lucky I had somebody there to like help me through some of these like later nights in that race, because 4.5 days with 4.5 hours of sleep is like, I've never experienced anything like it. Not many people have, but just knowing that you can push through that pain through that little amount of sleep has helped me so much coming into some of these other races. So jumping down into a, 24, 48, 12-hour race, like the mentality going into these races, I feel like it's so much better having had pushed through 4.5 days with almost no sleep. So jumping down to 24 hours, it's like, wow, that race goes by really quick.
I look at like the Moab 240 specifically. I look at races like that the same way I think most people look at World's Toughest Mudder. Like, oh, that's crazy. Oh, I could never do that. Oh, I don't even like to drive that far. Like that, 240 miles, 4 days of straight running. To me, I get why people like when I tell my friends about World's Toughest Mudder, they're like, why would you do that? Like I feel like it's the same, like almost a 1-to-1 comparison.
Yeah. So to build up World's Toughest a little bit, like the Moab 240, I needed to catch up on sleep a little bit more afterwards. But the Moab 240, I was moving around much quicker. World's Toughest beats you up so much. If you were pushing a World's Toughest and you were out there the full 24 hours, it beats you up so much. It's impressive. So not only for people that are like pushing for, 100 plus miles, but anyone else that's out there. I mean, you do 25 miles in 24 hours, 50, 75, whatever mark you happen to hit. It's impressive because that race beats you up.
Like physically, like you will have bruises on your body. You'll look like you got dragged into an alley, and you'll walk about the same way too.
I mean, I put pictures up on like Instagram after World's Toughest or Toughest Mudder, and I mean, it's nothing compared to what a 4-day race. Like my entire body, my legs, my arms, my core, everything is bruised and beaten. Like, I mean, after a 4-day race, I don't get that 24-hour fever or whatever that you get after Worlds. Like, I was like, yeah, I was in pain because I pushed myself for a really long time. Worlds, like your entire body hurts. And then because you're in that water, you're like, I mean, your core temperature is affected so much. Like after Worlds, it can be a rough couple of days.
Yeah, I physically could not walk after 2019. I had to sit down on my butt and slide downstairs, and it's good times. Hey, I got some listener questions. I told some people that we were going to talk, and they had some questions for you. John Hobson asks, mentally, what's the hardest part about preparing for a new venue that's never been used before? Talking about Laughlin. How do you approach that?
The hardest thing coming into Laughlin is going to be, one, are they going to find some kind of elevation out there? From what I can see on a map when I zoom in on Google, is like it's hard to see that they're going to put any elevation in that course. I'm sure they're going to try somehow. So one is like, what kind of elevation are they going to put in there to slow you down? And two is, if they don't find elevation, what are they going to put in our way to slow us down?
You've run Chicago several times. I remember the first toughest I ran in Chicago, everyone knew it was going to be flat. And TMHQ knew it was going to be flat. And so they're like, okay, your penalties are going to be 3/4 of a mile for missing operation, or for failing operation. Like they don't want people running up the score. They don't want to make it easy. If someone ever gets 125, they're not going to make it easy for them.
Yeah, like, that ultimately could be a goal. Like if I heal up and I'm ready to run Worlds as a team with Jake, ultimately our goal is to beat the current record of 120 miles in that race. And I'm pretty sure Kyle will put everything in our way to make sure that we do not hit that mark. So, I mean, just like going back to Chicago with Jake and I running, like, we hit 70 miles in, I think it was 11:48. So strategy wise, we played it safe towards the end of the race, where, maybe end of the day, we could have saved 15 minutes on that course. Now, if you didn't put 2 water crossings that destroyed your energy, we probably could have put in 75 miles, no problem. But in that. So he put in, there's something always in the way from making you go further. So, at Worlds, maybe it's going to be something mentally puts in our way. Like in Seattle, Javier and Christian were like cruising through EST, and Jake and I run up on this thing and we're like, I don't think I want to go through EST. For the first time in my Tough Mudder career ever, I'm like, I'm not going to go through EST. This looks scary. And I really hope Kyle doesn't listen to this so that he doesn't do this at Worlds. But in Seattle, the volume, you could not go through EST without hitting a wire. Most of the time you can zigzag your way through wires or crawl, lay down, get in the mud to get out of the wires. In Seattle, no, that was not happening. You were going to go through EST. You were going to get zapped. Doesn't matter what kind of strategy you had going through that obstacle.
There's always a option with the electrical obstacles. There's always an option, because some people physically can't, right? They have a pacemaker, or for whatever reason they can't go through, or metal in their body. But it's always worse. Like it's always a longer or a either mileage or time wise, or like, okay, you don't want to do EST, you got to go over Everest and over 3 8-foot walls instead. Then like it's so they want to force you to go through EST, but you have an option. But no, you're right. Like Kyle already told me like about the EST pitfall crossover obstacle. Have you heard about this?
I'm not excited at all. No.
You'll have an option to go around it, but it's not going to be pleasant either way. So,
Kyle, please, no, just like, come on, take it easy on us, please.
Mike Stefano asks, how has being on a team with Javier and the rest of them been going for you this year? We've talked about that a little bit, but generally, like, what do you think?
So, I mean, there's something, that I have to like kind of like call out in, like, we've ran as a team, this entire year, which has been great. Like the bond that us four have built is amazing. We have an Instagram chat going and we're shooting messages back and forth daily, but like coming together, like you look at the year as a whole, like Christian, I didn't know Christian before this year. I had to run with him. Like he has been the MVP of our team, the youngest person on our team, by far. And like, he is a person to be reckoned with in the years to come for these races. Like he has been crushing it for us. Jake has been killing obstacles. Javier is like the team leader. And for me, like I've struggled in a couple of these races. So we come into the Poconos, within a couple of months of me having rhabdo after a 48-hour race up in Idaho. So, I'm 8 weeks out of the hospital. Like, what's going on with me during that race in the Poconos, I have no idea. But like Javier jumps in, he's like, hey, here's half a bottle of Pepto. Here's some Athletic Brewing. Here's a Tums. Here's some random pill I was scavenging the pit area for and gave you. Like, you're either going to like keel over and die from this, or we are going to kick some serious butt in this race. So like without the team in Poconos, like I was out for a couple of hours because I hadn't been training for high intensity races yet. I was training volume, and, I was having GI issues, whether it was, mental from having rhabdo, not getting the level of training I needed, but like the team covered for me. Like I was out for 3 or 4 hours in the Poconos, like dying in the tent. And Javier literally like came in there and like resurrected me so that I could get out for a few more laps at the end of the race. And then you jump into, Seattle, where going into the race, my team like comes into the hotel room in Seattle and they're like, Elliot, you're wearing a boot. What is going on? Are you even racing with us this weekend? And we're like, the tentative plan going into that race was like Javier and Christian, planned to run solo. Jake and I were as a team. So those guys wanted to run the most miles, Jake and I the least miles, to get some training in. And, it just kind of like came out where we were doing so good in that race. We didn't have a lot of competition. So I bowed out earlier in the middle of the night. I was in sweatpants and a warm jacket running around in my dry robe, like videoing the team going through obstacles, just like relaxing and, making sure I didn't push myself too hard. But, without the team, like, like I was the weak link of the team this year, I think, where like these guys like helped me get through some obstacles and we were still able to win. But, this team has just been like, great. We all support each other. We're able to rally around each other. We're able to problem solve to make sure that we're still able to win a race. But like this team has just been phenomenal.
Just by way of a disclaimer, I do not recommend taking mystery medicine out on course at any time. I
do not either. Just to be clear.
Javier actually.
My team was looking. They were looking out for my best interest.
Javier actually had a question. Something about some stuff you left in his luggage. Do you know anything about this? He said to ask you about some stuff that you left in his luggage. You'd have to
stuff I left in his luggage.
You'll maybe have to ask him about that in your Instagram chat.
I'm probably going to have to ask him about this. Correct, unless he's talking about like someone taking his Blake mitts. Maybe he's looking for some of those. Maybe World's Toughest is going to be a little colder, and he's looking for those. I don't know.
Kevin Chow says to ask about your stress fracture and going for the Triple Crown next year. What are your plans next year, the Triple Crown? Tell the people at home, what's the Triple Crown?
So, next year my focus is going to be a little bit different. Obstacle course racing is going to take, a little bit of a backseat to ultra running. So the Triple Crown of 200s is going to be the Tahoe 200 in June, the Bigfoot 200 in August, and the Moab 240 in October. So
each of those numbers you're mentioning are miles: 200 miles, 200 miles, 240 miles.
Correct. So those are miles, and for the non, people that think like us, yes, those are running miles on your feet, not driving miles in a car or on a bike.
Are you excited about that? Are you dreading it? Is there anything past that? That seems like pretty the top of the peak there.
I mean, I want to take, when I think ultra running, I want that to be like the peak of my ultra running career, and then maybe focus back in on a couple of races per year. Because training for a 200 plus mile race is it consumes your life. I have a full-time job where I might work 40 to 60 hours a week. Well, 20 to 30 hours a week after that are training. So it's hard to have strong relationships with family, friends, significant others outside of work and training, because that's your focus. So my focus next year will be on those. Fortunately, there are a couple of, I think there's at least one toughest, maybe an Infinity or two, plus Worlds. We'll see where we're at. I don't think I'll run Worlds again next year solo, but maybe as a team, just because Worlds will end up being 4 to 6 weeks after the Moab 240, and that's a quick recovery time frame to be able to come back to another race of that distance.
Sure. And honestly, after running 3 200 plus mile races, it's crazy to think that Worlds could be the 4th longest race you run next year.
Yeah, definitely. And there's one. So this year, even going back to the toughest of this year, going into Poconos. So I've got the stress fracture on my foot, which has been building a little bit, and then we had the wildfires up next to Tahoe. So my training toughest in Seattle was the furthest from optimal you could ever ask for. I couldn't train outside because the air quality in Reno and Tahoe was awful. So eventually, I did try a couple of runs outside, which ended up destroying my lungs completely. And then the stress fracture occurs just, one bad run, one bad step out of millions of steps. So going into toughest West, my lungs were messed up from the smoke. My foot was messed up from one bad run. So, that caused some problems, but, really, really hoping that this heals now so that I can, have a strong entrance into next year with my, plans to run that Triple Crown. Plus, hopefully, I still want to be successful in OCR next year. And then, maybe the year after that, I focus on something like an orange jacket or, something around that. There's this prestige to an orange jacket. I'd love to get to that point, but you look at the names of the people that have that jacket, Chris Mendoza. I feel like there's a button coming on right now.
There it is.
There it is. Chris Mendoza, Trevor Psycho, Ryan Atkins. Getting up on a list like that, would just be, it would be so cool to be put on the same list as those folks. And, Javier made it last year, who was on our team this year. And, his experience and that he brought out of that and has he has shared with our team has been great. So it'd be great to get to that same level. And, coming into as well, so us as a team, we've had a really strong year. And, after Seattle, I was in Boise, staying at my brother's place because I was doing some travel, and I had my dog there staying with him. And I just happened to see this post come up from Kyle about contender status again. And I'm like, all right, I already have contender status, essentially from a team perspective, but even like with the mileage that Jake and I ran in Chicago, I ran 40 miles in Chicago. Jake ran 45 to get to that 70. So even as an individual contender, I essentially ran enough mileage. But, I see this post come out on the World's Toughest Community page, and, I'm going through the initial list, like elite contenders, probably not going to change unless somebody got, first, which I think, is Vincent, who already had elite contender status, and Trevor, who of course is there from his past performance. And then I'm reading down this list. Javier, okay, yeah, he's on there. Not surprised he was already on there. And then I see Christian, and then I see Jake, and then I see myself. And I'm just baffled. I'm like, what is going on? Like, wow. So like I immediately called the Four Locos group chat on Instagram, and we're like, only Jake answers. And I'm like, dude, I have some exciting news. Like, where's Javier? Where's Christian? They couldn't get on. So we ended up getting on FaceTime, and we're like, dude, all four of us on Team Four Loco have elite contender status at Worlds. And, it's like for, Javier, he got third in 2019 at Worlds, like in 100 miles. So he has the orange jacket. So it was expected for him to be there. And for Jake and Christian and myself, like it was like this emotional experience for us to all be added to that list. It's like, we've put in the work, we've worked our butts off for how many years to get to this point, and we're finally on this elite contenders list for Worlds. It's just like, what is going on? There's like some imposter syndrome going on. Like, do we deserve this? And it's like it's just an incredible feeling between all of us, like hitting this level of running. We're like, wow, this is amazing. We're so ready for Worlds. We're going to train our butts off. We're going to prove ourselves. Like, let's do this.
You're talking about getting 100 miles in 2023 or 2024. Like, you did 85 last year, or in 2019. Like, that's only 3 more laps.
I mean, only 3 more laps, and you look at the logistics of it. So I think, I listened to Carlo and you talk on the podcast yesterday while I was up hiking, and like one of the key things you mentioned was to newcomers is spend less time in the pit. Don't sit down. I'm thinking of like a couple of mistakes I made in 2019 where, one, there were a couple of times I sat down in the pit. That time adds up very, very quickly. And then the other mistake I made was not putting on a wetsuit quick enough. Like, I went until I almost got hypothermic before I put on a wetsuit. And then because I was so cold, I overcompensated. I put on a 5'3" wetsuit as my first choice once I got too cold. I ran 1 lap in a 5'3" wetsuit, and it was like I was in a sauna. Like, somebody get me out of this thing. It was miserable. Like, I was so hot. Like, I had to go slower because I was too warm in a wetsuit. So in 2019, I went through 2 different full wetsuit changes. Not a good idea.
And that eats up time too. When you say 5'3", 5 mil for your core, 3 mil for your arms and legs for people who are new to it. Yeah, if you get too hot, it's just as bad as getting too cold. Maybe worse, because it can be harder to cool off.
I would say almost like going into a 5'3" and overheating. I'd say overheating instead of being too cold is more of a problem.
Matthew Lewis asks, what is on your checklist of stuff to bring? Curious on how much stuff you bring.
So, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to look at this for this year. So, going in solo and going in as a team is 2 completely different strategies. So, going solo, one thing to make sure that you're really prepared for is night ops in Seattle. Given I only ran 20 miles in Seattle, 3 of those laps I was having major headlamp issues. Like, make sure you have a good headlamp. Make sure you have spare batteries. I spent top dollar on a couple of headlamps going into Worlds to make sure that I don't have that problem.
Let's talk. I've had 2
as far
people
as running as a team.
I've had 2 people this week ask me about headlamps. Let's talk specifics. Like what headlamp did you have that didn't work, and what headlamp did you get that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so I mean, I had a Black Diamond Storm. That the problem with those is they're extremely bright, so they're perfect for like the first mile or 2 of a lap. But then however those lights are programmed, once the battery level gets to a certain point, it dims. So you're running with an extremely dim headlamp going into, the second half of your lap. I've had some cheaper headlamps that used to work great, but then, started to deteriorate too much where, they just weren't working for me. So, one of the brands of the headlamp that I went into these big 200-mile or adventure races with is a Lupine North America headlamp. So, I mean, definitely, I probably spent double to triple on these headlamps, but like, it was like you're running with a car headlight in front of you, like worth it without a doubt. So coming into this race, they aren't even at my house yet. I ordered a Lupin headlamp to go into WTM 2021 to make sure that like I do not have these issues. It's worth the extra buck to make sure you're ready to go.
So the Black Diamond ones you mentioned, I don't know the model exactly, but they're very popular because they're like $30 or $40, and they take AAA batteries, and so it's very like, hey, I need a headlamp. This is a headlamp. It's affordable, but you'll find yourself, especially if you're serious, you need to change the batteries almost every lap to get which takes up time, and like the whole it's 24 hours long, but it's only 24 hours long. Like you need those minutes on the course. And so I got turned on to it by a 100. I don't want to drop names because I'm not sure if there's sponsorship stuff, but I got the Lupine lights. I got them, and it's funny you mentioned they're like a car headlight because I was running with them, and I was wearing a Lupine light, and I think it's Lupine, however you pronounce it. And so I saw a runner come in the other direction, and so it's really bright, and so you kind of turn it away because you don't want to like blind them as they're blind them as they're walking past you or running past you. And the guy coming the other direction, he's like, I thought there was a car on the trail. Like, they're super, super bright lights. They have an external battery that you have to charge, like with a micro USB. So you have to be aware of that. Like, maybe buy an extra battery, make sure, but maybe 2 like, you're spending so many hours training for this race. The race costs $500 just to get to the start line. Like, it's worth the extra dollars to spend it. And it's like, I think the Lupine lights start at like $100. Which sounds crazy for a headlamp that you're going to use for one night, for 12 hours. But it's an investment, and it'll last you for years, and it's going to be honestly, you're going to spend more than that in batteries probably. And in time, if you value that time, you want to be on the course, not in the pit changing batteries. So no, I agree with you.
So I'm feeling some sponsorship coming on here.
I should call them, right? I don't have any headlamp sponsors. Lupine, if you're listening, give me a call. We'll talk. But I'm not sponsored, just a fan. But I bought an extra one, and I have extra batteries. Like, I believe those lights, and they're like water. Like, whatever headlamp you buy, it has to be able to get dunked and go in mud. And some people, they'll buy the cheapest light they can, and then they'll which is fine. Like, it's expensive to get the race, and maybe you're trying to save money on gear, and they'll get like some gel, and they'll like waterproof their own headlamp. And I'm like, man, you're asking for trouble. Like, you're gonna have to bring like 3 headlamps anyway, just to make sure you have an extra one ready. Anyway, it is more money to invest in a strong headlight, but I think it's worth it.
Yep. I mean, I can guarantee you that in my 3 WTMs plus all of my toughest races, that I have spent way more than a world's toughest entry on headlamps alone. Like, come on. Like, we have to be able to find something better than that. So, I mean, between the Moab 240 plus any of my racing that has been like outside of that race, like this is like it has been like the premier light that I've used, and whatever their cheapest headlamp is right now is still going to be way more than anything you can find on Amazon or REI, but not tested yet. So I'm not telling you to get it, but I'm just gonna like, it's what I'm going to be using, but I think it's going to be worth $1. Like their quality of lights that I think I'm going to be getting here to use for Worlds, it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, I'm going to be running it with Lupine. I'm going to bring some $40 Black Diamond thing with a baggie full of batteries just in case. Like just in case, I don't know, there's a EMP strike and I need an extra headlamp, but I hope I don't need it. I
mean, always have to have a backup regardless whether, I mean, that's cheap, you know, a $20, $30, $40 headlamp. I'd say, you know, that's a good idea. But I think, you know, with like the Lupines, you're probably going to have, you know, one or multiple, like the ability to charge those headlamps, because you can't, you know, throw a double or triple A battery into those things.
Yeah, they're an external battery. I just bought an extra battery, and so hopefully I can swap them out and charge the other one. And all you need to charge them is just like, you know, those battery packs that people have to charge their phones as a backup. But again, yeah, you don't want, and the swapping out batteries is super fast too. It's just like pop, pop. It's not like open. Wait,
what was that sound again?
Which sound?
What was that sound again?
What other? I kind of interrupted you on headlamps. What other gear specific stuff are you thinking of for this year?
You know, I'd say one thing. I'm going to use Javier as an example here. Make sure you have some sort of long compression or long wetsuit on throughout the race, because if you look at pictures of Javier's knees after wearing a shorty the entire race in 2019, like make sure you have something to protect your knees. Like that's huge. And other than that, like depending on which way you go, you know, I still don't know. It's going to depend on how my foot feels come November. But if you know you're running as a team and you're spending time off the course, make sure you're able to switch into dry clothes and stay warm. And if you're running as an individual, I'd say make sure that, you know, whether it's a 5.3, a 3.2, wetsuit top or bottom, whatever you're using, make sure you've tested it out to make sure that, you know, it's the right piece of equipment for you to use for the long term. Because I just remember in 2019 that, you know, changing out of, I went from, you know, just compression to a wetsuit top to a 5.3, then to a 3.2 for the rest of the race. That many changes in gear when you're running individually, you know, I probably could have, with the amount of time I spent in the pit changing and doing whatever else, I probably could have put in another lap, which takes me from number 7 to potentially in the top 5.
Isn't that crazy? Just your clothes changing time cost you 5 miles probably.
I mean, it's possible. I don't remember exactly what time I came in at, but yeah, it's like it could have potentially cost me the difference between 85 and 90 miles, which in my mind is, you know, a big difference just because it took me too long to change clothes.
You're at a much higher level mileage wise, things like what you're thinking of for this year than I am. But something I fight against, my brain fights against, is I think, oh, well, I just, you know, it's going to get dark this lap, so I need to put on my wetsuit. And so your brain's like, okay, so it's like, we can take a break this lap. It's like an excuse to spend some time in the pit. You don't need to. No, I have to put my wetsuit on. Yes, you do. You do have to put a wetsuit on, but you don't have to spend 20 minutes putting on a wetsuit. Putting on a wetsuit, we should talk about the bag trick, the plastic bag trick. You know that for your feet and your arms? You put
yes, I did use that. Yep.
Like you put up like a grocery bag from, you know, your local grocery store or Target or whatever, put it on your hand and it'll slide right in. It'll slide right in that sleeve. Do the same thing on your feet, slide. Bring a bunch of them so you can just rip the bag off. You don't need to worry about saving the bag and you're not going to have to put it back on. So these are single-use bags. Putting the wetsuit on should literally take you less than a minute. I'm not exaggerating, less than 60 seconds. And that's a long time. You don't need to spend 20 minutes to put on a wetsuit.
If you can put on a wetsuit in a minute, I am impressed.
I'll come to my tent. I'll show you. I used to do this for a living. Putting on a wetsuit should not. Okay, well, we can agree it should not take 20 minutes. Like, you need to get in, you need to get out, and don't make excuses to spend time in the bed.
I'm expecting a YouTube video from Will Hicks before World's Toughest Mudder on how to put a wetsuit on in under 1 minute.
So I'll give you some basic tips. So the plastic bag trick will help you. Like, literally bring 4 bags per person. Like, one and pop. Have your pit crew help you. Like, 2, you want a front zip wetsuit. Like, back zip is fine if that's what you got. You already have a back zip, that's fine. But it's harder to get into. It's harder to get out of. You're probably going to need help. And I had a team meeting with my team last night. We have 4 guys, team Fat Boys, and we were talking about ways to save time on the course. And we talked about stuff like not stopping in the pit, not sitting down, and then we talked about bathroom stops. And 2 of my guys are like, yeah, we need to stop, and it takes time to take the wetsuit off. And I was a scuba instructor for a long time, and I told my students, and my guys have heard, my team has heard this too. I told them, I was like, there's 2 types of people. 2 types of scuba divers. There are ones that pee in their wetsuit, and there are ones that lie about it. There is no reason you're in and out of disgusting, filthy mud. And this sounds terrible, I know. And people are like, ew, gross. I'm telling you. Like, do you want to spend time getting miles, or do you want to spend time in a porta potty? Like, it sounds gross. But again, we're there for miles. We're not there because it's a clean, like, you got to keep moving. Ask Rhea Coble how she got 90 miles the first year she won. I feel bad even, like, she tells the story. Like, she had to stop and sit down, but she didn't. She was there to win. And she had to throw that wetsuit away after the race, but she was on the top step of the podium. And Elliot, if you had a decision to make, I can stop to sit down to use the restroom, or I can be on the top of the podium. You're going to pick the podium, right?
Podium, no question.
No question. I mean, and if it's for me,
0 question to that.
For me, if it's like 50 miles or stop to sit down to use the bathroom, I'm going to get. Not only will I have a brown bib, I might have a brown wetsuit. And it's not even close.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. Here's the thing. Before you go into that race, when you're having that meeting before the race with your team, with your pit crew, set the expectation that when you are coming out of that wetsuit, it is not going to look or smell good at all.
Bring a trash bag. Bring like a brown like a big old black garbage bag. I said brown. I meant black, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's not going to be pretty from a smell or look perspective. Sometimes it's not going to be pretty. But I mean, like, if you are out there, if you want to push, if you want to get that mileage that you want to reach, like, you're not going to be taking those bathroom breaks that you would wish to have in a comfortable perspective. This is one of the things you have to be ready for, and it's not something that you yourself have to only prepare for. It's your pit crew has to be prepared for that afterwards.
There are people that are visibly disgusted with me right now in their car, and they're like, ew, I would never. Listen, if you want that silver bib, if you're at 70 miles, and it's not just, honestly, it adds up, right? It's like, it's that decisions you make on like the 3rd lap, and then on the 5th lap, and then the 9th lap. Like, it adds up over the course of the race to be like, man, I spent 2 laps worth of time putting on a wetsuit, using the bathroom, sitting down, getting a rock out of my shoe. Like, these little things, they add up so fast. One year, I forgot to trim my toenails before the race. And so they were like, jamming, and I had to stop. I had to take up my shoes. I had those knee-high mud gear socks on underneath my wetsuit. So I was like, this is just cut into the sock. Like, let's just, so we cut holes in the sock, trim my toenail like through this little corner of the sock, and then, and that cost, it was probably 10, 15. Anytime you sit down, it's at least 15 minutes. Like, if you sit down, you're just forget 15 minutes right there. So you sit down 4 times, that's an hour. That's not for me. It's a lap for you. It's probably half a lap for me, but anyway.
I mean, like some of these basic tips, like all you have to do is like, I mean, one, it's like listening to like a podcast like this, or just like follow on Facebook, the world's toughest community. And I guarantee you, like a week to 10 days out from the race, you're going to start getting those, like seeing those messages, like everybody make sure to clip your toenails, you know, something like that, just to make sure that like you're ready to go. Like just be involved in those communities, make sure you're like within those lines of communication so that you're seeing some of those last minute tips and tricks to make sure that your race is more successful.
Yeah, I think probably most people listen to this are also already members of that community group. But if you're not, get on Facebook. It's worth, like, even if you don't have Facebook, it's worth getting a burner Facebook account to join the World's Toughest Mudder community group. It's only open to people who are signed up to run World's Toughest Mudder, to pit for World's Toughest Mudder, or who have run it in the past. So it's a tight-knit community, but literally any question you have is either already been answered and you can find it in the search, or you can ask it and people will help you out.
Yeah, I mean, like without a doubt, like that. And I mean, I'm just going to take Javier again as an example for this. Is this week he threw a post up on like on that page, like, anybody ask me a question, like whatever you want it to be, like what do you want to know about the race, like what's going to help you get through this. So, you know, when a post like that comes out, feel free to like ask him. Like, I mean, I guarantee you, ask Javier, ask Trevor, ask Chris, whomever it happens to be, ask Amelia, like anybody, like ask them these questions. They're more than likely going to respond. Like I used to look up to Trevor before I even started World's Toughest Mudder. Like you see him on like a YouTube video or something like that, like where you're like, this dude is incredible. Like, wow. Like I guarantee you, if you get on, you know, Facebook, Instagram, something like that, and you ask him a legitimate question, he's more than likely going to respond to you. Like I never expected to like hang out with Amelia or Trevor, any of these types of folks. And over the course of this last year, I've had conversations with Amelia. I've talked with Trevor. Like the first time I've ever outdoor rock climbed was with Trevor the day before the toughest mudder in Seattle. Like these guys are like, they're down to earth people that want to help everybody be successful in this sport.
I think I have a theory that the longer someone can run, the more, and it's obviously isn't 100%, but the more like down to earth, thoughtful, introspective. When you're running 50 miles or 700 miles or 240 miles, even if you have a team, you have a lot of time inside your head. You have just nothing but time to think and to like contemplate like the deep questions. And you're kind of forced to by the pain. Like you can either focus on the pain or you can think about something else. And if you're thinking about the pain, you're not going to run the 50, the 100, the 240. But so you start thinking about like, I think and maybe it's just the experiencing the pain that, you know, helps something in the soul. I don't know. But like I've literally never, every single 100+ miler person I've talked with, super cool. Like in different ways. And maybe honestly, some people are quirky. Like you got to be a little bit quirky to run that far too, right? But every time I've left that conversation being like, yeah, I got something out of it. That was good.
I mean, like being able to, like, I'd say everyone that's doing these types of races to some extent is willing to push past their limits. And that's something that, you know, I never expected to be doing any of this type of stuff. It's just kind of, it's slowly happened, and I've grown into it. And now I have the mentality where like, I need to push myself. I need to increase my expectations of myself constantly to keep myself satisfied. So, you know, on an annual basis, almost like, you know, I'm making a race schedule, and I'm like, this is what I want to accomplish. And you compare that to what you did the years previous, and is like, is it more? Is it less? So you just have to, you know, gradually, like, set those expectations for yourself and slowly increase that. Because I mean, ultimately, in this race, we all want to win, of course, but I think, self-satisfaction when you're coming into these races or finishing these races is a huge thing.
Yeah, I don't enjoy running. I enjoy having run. Like,
exactly.
Once I'm out there,
fun, that's what it's about,
right? Like the middle part of it. But after I'm done, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. Good job. Hey, Elliot, before we wrap up here, if you had one tip to give to a first timer, what would you tell them?
I mean, there's a couple of things, and I think we've kind of gone through this already. Coming specifically into Worlds, it's again that making sure when you're in the pits, don't sit down. I've done it in the past. If you sit down, you're getting yourself into trouble. Don't lay down. Anyone can stand up or push themselves a little bit longer. So stay up, keep pushing yourself. Of course, keep that within your boundaries of safety. I've taken myself too far in a 48-hour race. So I push myself too far. So know your limits, but keep yourself on that boundary and keep pushing yourself to grow as a person, grow as an athlete, grow as an individual. Just keep pushing yourself and set expectations for yourself that are right around what you think you're capable of, if not a little bit beyond, so that you can keep growing as an individual, growing as an athlete, growing as just mentally, whatever it happens to be. Just keep pushing yourself a little bit and challenging yourself so that you can continue to grow.
Elliot, do you have any sponsors or anything you want to plug?
I'd say no sponsors, of course, accepting applications. But overall, there's been so many people that have been influential in not only this season, but my, call it a career as an athlete. My family that supported me through being my pit crew at Worlds or being my pit crew at these insanely long races. My friends, my team this year has been incredible, and then just the community in general. Without you, I doubt I'd be pushing myself to the level that I currently am. So thank you to all of you for even getting me to the point that I am right now. And hopefully, some of this can help, other people in the community grow to the level I'm at or beyond at this point.
How can people follow you on social media?
Yeah. So, Elliot Rueb on Facebook, Elliot.Rueb on Instagram. I'm somewhat active on both those platforms, but any questions about the races that I'm doing or Worlds or anything like that going into these races, feel free to reach out to me. Just like I mentioned about some of those other athletes, happy to help with anything you think you may need going into these races. This is it's a community. It's a great group to be involved with. Reach out to me if there's any questions and anything like that. But yeah, Will, thank you so much for having me on again. It's been great talking with you.
Elliot Rueb, thanks much. Special thanks to Elliot Rueb for appearing in this episode. Well done, Elliot. Good luck in Laughlin. I'd love to see 100 miles from you this year. You can shoot me a text at 619-485-2726. You can leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts or lovethepodcast.com/tough. Shoot me an email, will@theocrreport.com. What else can you do? Follow us on Instagram at the OCR Report. Best OCR account on Instagram at the OCR Report. I will talk with you soon. I will see you soon. 4 weeks. Go spend time with someone you love.